In the final months of World War II, only one thing stood between the Allies and the heart of Germany. It wasn't an army, it was a river, the Rhine. To the Germans, this river was a sacred line of defense, and Hitler was convinced it was unbeatable. The Allied High Command had a massive, super detailed plan to cross it called Operation Plunder. We're talking over 1 million soldiers, thousands of cannons, and the biggest airborne drop of the entire war, all led by the British Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery. The plan was set for March 23rd, 1945. It was going to be a huge public spectacle. But almost 200 miles away, one American general decided he wasn't going to wait. He was impatient, he was rebellious, and he was about to tear up the official playbook. This is the insane story of how General George S. Patton didn't just ignore the plan. He secretly threw his army across the Rhine a full day before anyone else, using darkness, surprise, and unbelievable audacity. Was it a legendary move that broke the enemy's will to fight? Or was it a reckless gamble that risked everything for personal glory? To get how big of a deal this was, you have to understand the Rhine. It wasn't just 800 miles of water. It was a German legend. For centuries, it was Germany's shield. Hitler was betting his entire war on this river, thinking it would stop the Allies for months. Allied intelligence agreed. They expected a brutal, fanatical defense. Every bridge was wired to explode, and every inch was supposed to be defended to the last man. The Rhine was Germany's last stand. The guy in charge of the master plan was the Supreme Allied Commander, Dwight D. Eisenhower. His main attack was given to the 21st Army Group, led by Field Marshal Monty Montgomery. Now, Monty was the exact opposite of Patton. He was a super careful, precise general. He wouldn't attack unless he knew for a fact he would win, and even then he moved incredibly slowly. His soldiers liked that he didn't take crazy risks, but American commanders thought he was painfully unimaginative and slow. And then there was George S. Patton, leader of the U.S. Third Army. If Monty was cautious, Patton was pure aggression. His entire strategy was basically keep punching. He was famous for being bold, fast, and never giving the enemy a second to breathe. His Third Army was a terrifyingly fast war machine, at one point blitzing 60 miles in just 2 weeks. The rivalry between Patton and Monty wasn't just personal, it was a total clash of styles. They could not stand each other. Patton hated what he saw as Monty's arrogance and how he always seemed to get the credit and the best supplies. As the Allies got to the Rhine, Monty was set up to get all the glory for the main crossing. Patton, watching from the south, decided he was going to steal it. Field Marshal Montgomery's plan, Operation Plunder, was an absolute symphony of destruction. He literally called it the greatest assault river crossing of all time. And honestly, he wasn't wrong. He had 1.2 million men under his command. The logistics were just staggering. For just one of his armies, engineers stockpiled 60,000 tons of ammo and 30,000 tons of gear. The plan was classic Monty. First, a mind-blowing artillery strike. On the night of March 23rd, 5,500 Allied cannons were going to absolutely pulverize the German defenses. After that, the river crossing would begin under a massive smokescreen. Waves of infantry would cross in assault boats and amphibious tanks. They even brought in Navy landing craft from D-Day, hauling them overland to the Rhine just for this. But the main event, the real spectacle, was Operation Varsity. This was a massive airborne assault planned for the next morning. Over 16,000 paratroopers would drop behind enemy lines to cause chaos and link up with the ground troops. It was a brilliant, unstoppable plan. The world's press was there. Winston Churchill himself showed up to watch. All eyes were on Montgomery. The whole world was waiting, and that's exactly what Patton was counting on. While Monty was setting up his huge production, Patton's Third Army was on an absolute tear. In a wild 10-day campaign, they had basically destroyed 2 German armies and taken over 100,000 prisoners. His tanks were moving so fast they were literally running off their maps. By the 3rd week of March, they were staring right across the Rhine. For Patton, this was a golden opportunity. He saw a broken, demoralized enemy in full retreat. Where Monty saw the need for overwhelming force, Patton saw a chance to take the Rhine on the run. He was also furious that his army was being sidelined for Monty's show. He had even been forced to give some of his own troops to Montgomery, which he took as a personal insult. The official plan from his boss, General Omar Bradley, was for Patton to make a smaller crossing after Monty's main attack was already a success. Patton had zero intention of waiting. He knew his boss, Bradley, was also frustrated with Monty's slow pace. So Patton made a call and got what amounted to a wink and a nod from Bradley, an informal go-ahead to try something aggressive if the opportunity arose. That was all he needed. What happened next was a masterclass in deception. While it seemed like a spontaneous idea, Patton's staff had been quietly gathering assault boats and bridging equipment for months, just in case. Patton ordered a massive fake-out. He had his troops create a huge smokescreen and move artillery around the city of Mainz, making it look like a major attack was coming there. But the real assault force was secretly gathering 10 miles south, at the quiet town of Oppenheim, under the cover of darkness and total radio silence. The target was a stretch of riverbank that intel said was barely defended at all. In fact, a German officer in that exact spot filed a report on the evening of March 22nd that said, "Sector tranquil, no enemy action." He had no idea thousands of American soldiers were hiding across the water, about to make him tragically wrong. The night of March 22nd, 1945 was cold, dark, and completely silent. On the German side of the river, the defenders were spread thin and had no idea what was coming. They were expecting a massive, deafening artillery barrage to announce any attack, just like the one Monty was planning. They were ready for noise and fire. They were not ready for silence. At exactly 10 p.m., the order came, but there was no thunder of cannons, just the quiet sound of boats sliding into the water. The first wave of men from the 5th Infantry Division paddled across the 900-foot wide river, hearts pounding, expecting all hell to break loose at any second. But nothing happened. The boats touched the far shore without a single shot being fired. The first American soldiers were across the Rhine. The Germans, miles away, were completely oblivious. For hours, they had no idea the river had been breached. Wave after wave of troops followed in the darkness. By the time the Germans finally realized what was happening, it was too late. Their response was panicked and disorganized. By morning, Patton had a solid foothold. By breakfast, thousands of GIs were 6 miles deep inside Germany. Within 24 hours, engineers had a bridge up, and tanks from the 4th Armored Division started pouring across. The cost for this insane silent assault was shockingly low, with the 5th Infantry Division suffering minimal casualties. Patton hadn't just crossed the Rhine, he did it with stunning efficiency, proving speed and surprise could be deadlier and cheaper than a mountain of explosives. As his men were still crossing the dark river, Patton called his boss, General Bradley. Accounts of the call vary, but the triumphant spirit is the same. In one version, Patton was like a kid on Christmas morning, urging, "Brad, for God's sake, tell the world we're across." Bradley, knowing the political drama it would cause, told him to hold off, not wanting to steal Monty's thunder. But Patton's patience ran out. The next evening, right as Montgomery's giant operation was kicking off, he called Bradley again, practically shouting, "Brad, I want the world to know that Third Army made it before Monty starts across." Bradley, who had his own issues with Montgomery, agreed. He timed the press release perfectly. News of Patton's incredible success hit the headlines just as Monty was starting his own attack. The effect was exactly what Patton wanted. The world's headlines weren't about the start of Operation Plunder. They were about the fact that Patton was already across. In Washington, the Secretary of War reportedly yelled, "We gave Monty everything he asked for, and by God, Patton has crossed the Rhine." The news sent the German high command into a spiral. In his Berlin bunker, an enraged Hitler demanded a massive counterattack, only to be told the unthinkable. There were no reserves left to do it. Patton had hit a weak spot, and it had ruptured completely. The will of German soldiers to defend the river collapsed. In the following days, over 60,000 German troops in the area surrendered to the Third Army. With the crossing secured, Patton himself arrived at the new bridge. In a legendary moment of pure defiance, he walked to the middle, unzipped his fly, and urinated into the Rhine, making sure a photographer caught it for history. "I've been looking forward to this for a long time," he said. George S. Patton hadn't just crossed the Rhine, he had conquered it. So was Patton's secret crossing a 1,000 IQ play, or was it just a reckless gamble that got lucky? Historians still argue about it today. The argument for recklessness is pretty strong. He bent the rules, ignored the master plan, and launched a major attack without artillery or air support. If his intel had been wrong, if there had been a hidden German tank division waiting, it would have been a complete disaster. From this view, Patton was an egotistical gambler who got lucky, but the argument for genius is even stronger, and it's all in the results. Patton believed that being bold was its own form of safety. He saw an undefended riverbank not as a trap, but as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that had to be seized. He had a gut feeling for the enemy's weakness, and at Oppenheim, he was dead right. And you just can't argue with the outcome. His silent crossing was a psychological dagger that shattered the German front. It cost almost nothing in terms of casualties and led to tens of thousands of prisoners. It proved that sometimes a bold, unexpected punch is way more effective than a giant, telegraphed haymaker. Even Eisenhower wasn't mad. He sent Patton a letter praising the Third Army's spectacular achievement. Patton had broken the rules, but he delivered a massive victory that sped up the end of the war. Patton's secret Rhine crossing was more than just a race against Montgomery. It was the ultimate example of his entire philosophy of war. In one quiet night, he proved that audacity could be a weapon, speed could save lives, and one commander's gut instinct could change a campaign. He shattered the myth of the unbeatable Rhine and let his armies loose into the heart of Germany. The story is a timeless debate between playing it safe and taking a huge risk. It cemented Patton's legacy as one of the most brilliant and controversial generals in history, a man whose relentless drive for victory was unstoppable. Was it genius or insubordination? Maybe the answer is, it was both. And that's what makes the story of General George S. Patton so legendary. If you want to discover more insane stories and forgotten battles of World War II, make sure to smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications. And let us know in the comments, was Patton a genius, a reckless gambler, or both? We'll see you in the next one.